Moved back to support sick mother only to realize my father hid a secret second family, leaving me shocked and forced to navigate emotional chaos, family drama, and decide whether forgiveness could exist when truth was so painfully hidden. My name is Callan, and I am 27 years old. I never thought I'd end up in this kind of situation in this small town, especially not this soon. I had left 6 years ago with a degree in a field with an abundance of jobs in a major city, but I ended up in logistics with a small firm and barely scraped by. I lived in Denver and worked this dead-end job but enjoyed being alone and not being bound to anyone or anything. Then Mom called. She was 62, a woman with a reputation for being intimidating just by raising an eyebrow, and her voice when she called was different. She told me Dad had a serious case of diabetes side effects, and her own health wasn't good either. She needed me to come back. It wasn't just because she needed help getting her groceries or getting to appointments. She needed me because she actually did need someone, but she genuinely asked in a way she hadn't since before I left for college, 5 years before when I went back to college because I thought I might want to leave this small place for a bigger city. The last time I went back for more than a week I was in college at 19 years old. Back in this small place, everything seemed different, nostalgic in a smothering way. Everything smelled different, ripe, but different. Everything seemed smaller, including people. Mom met me at the small Iowa airport with that look in her eyes of relief and exhaustion she used to have all those years ago before she took up being someone intimidating in her own right when I got in trouble at school. Dad is 64, and when I arrived he seemed smaller in a way. His posture wasn't right. He seemed tired in a way I hadn't seen in him in a good 2 decades. His eyes were a deep, unpleasant shade of blue I had trouble describing before, but when I saw them in this state, right before my eyes, they seemed deep, deep pain. The first night in our small hometown passed in complete silence. Loading clothes into a small drawer in a small room, Mom fussing over me. "Rough week for you," Dad admitted but refused to commit to talking with me, which I didn't blame him a bit for since I wasn't exactly a visit in a mother's life when I left in the first place. A quick few days went by with me taking over handling Dad's medication and setting up appointments with our doctors. As if falling into a role I never really welcomed but never had a choice but to accept. Then one afternoon, in the middle of stocking groceries in our utility room, I saw a stack of letters hidden behind a picture frame in our hallway. They were all meant for my dad, and they were all dispatched from stationery with a picture of a small town 20 minutes away from where I knew very little. My curiosity, I have always strived to keep in check, got the better of me. I opened the first letter. Inside this letter, a woman named Marissa, 38 years old, with 5 years or more of knowing my dad if her letterhead and content were anything to go by, had apparently been carrying on an affair with him. Her letters were far from any pleasure/PR-filled messages, but rather intimate, personal, emotional letters bursting with news of her children, a boy named Eli, 10 years old, and a girl named Lila, 7 years old. At first I went paralyzed. I trembled all over, and her words crawled over each letter in a manner that repelled me but seemed impossible to suppress. Then all those times when Dad had stayed late for work meetings you never got to see got explained. And all the golfing with clients over the weekends too. Everything had a suddenly brutal explanation. After wrestling in my head to try and grasp this man I loved, this man I loved and trusted, this man I loved and trusted and counted on with every fiber and cell in me, and this man with a whole other life which was lived under such secrecy, such deftness, such skill, without anyone in our household getting a hint of it, not even my mom? When I shook Mom up on this news over dinner, she sat with a trembling finger planted over her forehead with a quiver in her otherwise rock-solid physique. She admitted she herself had always had a gut sense of this problem since years ago, when Dad had a sudden change in behavior. A whisper she overheard when she least expected it, sudden disappearances when she least expected them. She shook all over when she sat across from me in our dinner table, her small, straight-styled dinner table where all our talk and our silent moments seemed to filter into a synopsis of our otherwise messy life. I have never had trouble sleeping before this night. I walked the halls of our old home, through the rooms where my childhood scents were still present, Dad's study with all his old books, Mom's knitting nook where she had sat for countless hours making blankets for our family, and our living room with a worn-out couch and old family pictures, and thought of what this meant for each of us. Could Dad genuinely be the man I thought I knew all these years? Could Mom ever forgive him, or would this damage be an open wound forevermore? And what did I have to do with this strange life where everything seemed to be broken and layered with secrets kept under wraps for all these years? I thought of Eli's letters, with Dad talking about how proud he was of him, describing projects in school, playing in a soccer game, reading a bedtime story. Just the way he used to talk to me when I was a kid, never missing a detail. Was it love, or another deceit? I just couldn't stop thinking of all this, stop picturing this other life Dad must be leading without us. A parallel life where everything takes place a few miles from our lives, invisible and undercover. I wanted to scream, to break something, to demand an explanation, but all I did was remain in this dark room, with our old walls closing in against me, wondering if this discovery would allow me to see our family in a different way forevermore. I considered all this in relation to my future, relationships in particular, and trust and loyalty in all this. How could I look at people in a different way when a man I loved most in this life had kept an undercover life all these years? And this guilt attacked me, guilt for being angry, for being surprised, for being offended, for thinking I deserved an explanation when in reality I knew nothing but one side of this very complicated life. But I just couldn't push this thought aside. That weekend, I chose to go see them, to see Eli and Lila, to have a confrontation with this reality right in front of me. I organized a visit in the guise of needing to meet some of Dad's old friends, although every word seemed untrue. When I got to their small house on the outskirts of our hometown, Marissa stood in the doorway with a mix of surprise, wariness, and relief in her eyes. Eli, 10 years old, ran up her legs in excitement, a clone of Dad in every way too painful to recount, and Lila, 7 years old, peering shyly from behind the couch. And with all of them in front of me, I finally grasped the complexity of this situation. Not just letters, not just secrets, but living people, innocents with no idea they were soon to be swept up in a hurricane. The hours passed in a blur of small talk, awkward silences, and sidelong glances, each one building a facade of further confusion on top of my guilt-ridden conscience. As I left, I knew I barely recognized this stranger in a hometown stranger in a life where every self-explicative bubble stopped being self-evident. I knew nothing would never be the same again, that the very basis of my childhood, the very basis of the man I had loved with all innocence, now presented with inescapable flaws beyond mendable repair. But I simultaneously recognized a strange, unwilling sense of obligation, a need to somehow survive this maelstrom, somehow discover a way towards forgiveness, towards acceptance, towards mere coexistence. Answers were far from solutions, but solutions were coming. I knew they would challenge not merely Dad's deception but all of me, the limits of myself, a possibility of forgiveness in whatever path they chose, a viewpoint in their future remembrances of this treachery. That night, with all creaking steps in my child room beneath feet, getting used to typical life, I suddenly grasped in a flash of awesome awareness that life had become a puzzle, and I stood poised at the bottom of a piece I wasn't sure I knew how to fit in when dawn arrived with Mom up early in a cloud of busy dank in her kitchen inside our small cottage. I hadn't slept well, tossing and turning in bed, thinking of Marissa, Eli, and Lila, and how Dad had just compartmentalized two families in a way that no one seemed to notice. Breakfast was quiet. Mom just kept looking at me with a combination of worry and hope in her eyes, like she was asking silently if I had come to a decision on where to go next. I had none, and I wasn't sure if I even want them. I ended up spending the morning with Dad on his medication. His hands were shaking a bit as he attempted to do the insulin shots, and I had to tell him to be careful, taking hold of his arm to support him, feeling a sense of, oh God, he's really getting old in a way I never really comprehended before. A space seemed to exist between me and Dad, an invisible wall that had formed but in a strange way, a sense of closeness too, a sense of seeing him in a way I never had before, with all his imperfections. Mom left for her own doctor's appointment, and Dad and I were alone in the living room. I attempted to speak up, to try and find a way to address it. Dad, I know everything. I got up the courage to speak finally, my voice barely above a whisper. His hand stopped in midair over a crossword puzzle in front of him, and he turned to meet my eyes with a look I had come to know all along, pride and fear and defensiveness all jumbled into one. Callan, I can't. Dad got to speak before I cut him off. Tell me the truth, I cautioned. No way to sugarcoat it or lie to me? Dad sighed heavily, rubbing both hands over his face before finally talking. The story flowed forth from him, a veritable river burst that had been building up in him for decades now. "This is Marissa," he began, talking of how they met in a charity function 20 years ago. How he'd been lonely and misunderstood, and how over a series of events, a combination of selfish and cowardly acts, he ended up with 2 families. His voice relayed a sense of awe when talking of Eli and Lila, with a mix of guilt in them too, but most definitely with a sense of pride in a way. It did not make everything right. It did not remove the sting of betrayal. But listening to him speak so freely, so vulnerably, blurred further and further the lines of anger and empathy. Later in the afternoon, I decided to go and see Marissa again, this time on my own. I wanted to see them without Dad's influence in any way. I wanted to hear Eli talk about his life, school, baseball practice, and cartoons without Dad's prejudices skewing everything. Marissa opened the door warily but politely enough. Eli was busy with a book in the living room, Lila playing with her dolls. Eli, catching sight of me, froze and smiled hesitantly. "Your dad's son, right?" he asked, and I nodded, sitting down on a worn-out sofa in a way which felt almost like crashing someone else's party. They talked for a long time, with me asking him questions about school, friends, and subjects he enjoyed learning. He seemed bright, inquisitive, and very full of life, but with this tentative streak inside him, this question mark in his eyes. Why did this stranger appear in this way in his life? Lila soon appeared too, shy at first, hiding behind Marissa's leg, but slowly letting her guard down to show me pictures she had drawn of her own family, with Dad in them. And in this moment, I saw they did not think of Dad in terms of being a liar or a betrayer, but simply in terms of being Dad. That shook me up more than everything else put together. The problem with betrayal, with cheating, did not simply lie in Mom and Dad but in these children who were unaware of what basis they were resting on when it came to life. On making my way back home, I thought about forgiveness in this case. Could a forgiveness in this case be possible? Could I in any way forgive Dad for all of this when Dad and I sat in our living room with Nyan on Endeavor or television programs in the background? I finally asked him, "Do you even know what it's like to be on the other side of this?" He nodded slowly. "I do now," he said. "Every day I do." I wanted to believe him, to cling to scraps of the man I knew before all of this, but the reality was, I wasn't sure if I could. For the next few days, I attempted to fall into a rhythm. I drove Mom to appointments, cooked, ran chores, and checked in on Dad. But with each passing day, each returning trip home, I felt the pressure of this secret grow. I thought of Eli and Lila nonstop, pictured myself trying to grow up in a household where your father lived a life of deceit, where you had to watch your father split time between 2 worlds, 2 separate realities he strived to keep at an angle but somehow both connected. I called Marissa again, this time asking if I could spend more time with the kids. She hesitated before agreeing, saying, "They need someone in their lives they can really connect with. They need someone genuine. You can be that for them." That phone call swung an open door in a way I hadn't known I was eager for. The next weekend, I went over to their house, worked with Eli on a science project, with Lila on reading, and actually cooked them a simple meal all of us could share. At the end of it all, they were receptive, laughing with me at my awful attempt at making them a meal of spaghetti, needling me good-naturedly and laughing and referring to me as Uncle Callan. The word was heavy with all its meaning on my lips. On the drive home, I considered all of this inner turmoil. Here I sat, a 27-year-old man, stuck in a maelstrom of moral dilemmas and family ties and deception. I felt all of these things in equal parts, a sense of loyalty, a sense of righteousness, a sense of guilt and shame and need to protect. But beneath all this, I definitely felt this connection, a want to be with them in a way despite it all. Mom asked me when I returned how everything went. I took a moment to respond with a tentative there. "Good kids. Smart, funny, strong. But it's complicated." She nodded, comprehending much more than I did. That night, lying awake again, I thought about what lay next. To come at Dad head on, to demand more information? To bring Mom into this? Or to remove myself into a corner of this storm to allow all of us to coexist without disrupting this precarious balance that existed? The thoughts swirled in my head, but with them, a strange sense of clarity emerged. Nothing in life would be easy, and forgiveness would in no way be simple. But I understood I had a choice: to step away from this madness, or to work through it, no matter how complicated it might be, for the sake of both my family and this new family I seemed to have stumbled into. Things were not exactly simpler in the days to follow. Fights raged, small bouts of misunderstandings escalated into hours of thick-skinned silences, and I knew every move I made would reverberate with consequences for all of them. I took up a journaling habit, getting all of these thoughts, this fear, this hope onto paper. The simple motion of putting fingers to page helped me temporarily disentangle this ball of emotions inside me. I recorded each encounter, each slip of wordplay, each glance with 1,000 other thoughts in them. And through all this, I began to see a pattern, a ripple effect from all of Dad's errors. But this did not preclude who each of us were. Eli's smile, Lila's excitement, Mom's strength, are all testament to how life can thrive in a time of such brutal betrayal. While it did not mend this wound, it offered me a way forward, a light in this dark jungle to keep pushing through, to keep engaging, to keep figuring a way to operate in this complicated weave of a family life. I did not yet have any sense of forgiveness or if this were an option at all, but for perhaps the very first time since this whole nightmare of Dad's secret life began, I saw a glimmer of a chance at achieving a balance in all of this. The next week, I chose to spend more time with Eli and Lila, trying to grasp their reality and also figuring out the man my dad had been to them. It was weird, adjusting to their rhythms, lending a hand with school projects, cheering at soccer matches, and yes, even cookies in a kitchen with a different aroma altogether, the complete opposite of Mom's kitchen. Eli was a smart bug, 10 going on 16, always asking questions, always raising an eyebrow, with bright eyes but with a hint of wariness. Lila, 7 years old, was more reserved, observing before joining in, her curiosity sneaking out hesitantly. They were wary of me at first, unsure if this interloper had any business being in their lives, but they quickly warmed up to me, showing me their artwork, talking about friends in school, and even sharing secrets about Marissa's kitchen blunders and Dad's jokes. One afternoon, when we were all sitting in the park, Eli turned to me with a question I wasn't ready for. "Do you hate Dad?" I sat stock still. The query wasn't aggressive but simply childlike in its curiosity and search for understanding of adult complicatedness. I took a deep breath and chose my words carefully. "Not yet, Eli. I'm working on it." He nodded in satisfaction with this answer and ran off with friends, leaving me sitting on a park bench with a heavy heart. That's when it hit me that my brother and sister were not being held captive in this secret, but were figuring ways around it in ways I barely comprehended, and perhaps this very resilience is a skill I desperately need to learn from them. Meanwhile, in our household, Mom and Dad were at each other's throat. Every trivial talk they engaged in seemed to be fraught with utterances meant to suggest fault, anger, and pain. I did my level best to mediate, listening without judgment, and intervening with solutions when talk veered into personal territories, but all I could see was exhaustion etched on their grim faces. Mom's health was progressively failing her physique not up to hiding her struggles, and I swore to myself to support her in her every stumble, every cough, every indication of necessity for assistance. Meanwhile, Dad flip-flopped between penitence and defensiveness. Some days it would come out easy with regards to the second family, other days it would shut down, leaving me alone with the pain of the knowledge I now possessed. I started to notice the effects I was suffering. I am tired, exhausted, and forever questioning the morality of decisions I make. I want to be present for Mom, for Eli and Lila, for myself, but this tightrope performance was taking a toll on me. One evening, after assisting Dad with setting up his medication, I went outside, watching as the sun set through a deep purple sky, taking a moment to allow myself to breathe. I thought of forgiveness not just for Dad but for myself, for Mom, for this situation which had impacted all of us unfairly. Could I go a day without thinking of all the other lives he had touched, all of the deceit, all of the years of living two separate lives? Could I find a way to accept it all without becoming poisonous in all of our relationships? The following day, I made plans to take Eli and Lila to our local library, a quiet, sun-filled haven which existed in a bubble separate from our reality. They sat with me on a shelf-lined floor, sprawled among ancient tales of space, dinosaurs, and ancient people. Lila asked me for information on my life in Denver, and I started to relate it simply, without making it seem better or worse than our life but simply different. Eli, on the other hand, asked me about Dad, asking me why he got to spend time with me but also time with Marissa, and it hit me. The answer had to be given with childlike candor. Sometimes adults make mistakes, I explained. But they don't realize consequences sometimes right away. Your dad loves you both, but he made decisions which have hurt people, including your mom and me. They were silent in acceptance, without judgment, learning to balance both sides of a morally complicated universe and capable of carrying all this complicated emotion without blanching into self-pity. Later, they returned with me to Marissa's after our outing, watching in the rearview mirror as they excitedly talked of all of their books checked out. The car smelled slightly of crayon and peanut butter, and I understood I was starting to feel a sense of something I hadn't anticipated, a connection developing, a sense of purpose in this naughty situation that Dad had put me in. Back in our hometown, I found Mom sitting in her recliner, her hands busy with knitting. I told her about the library, the way Eli and Lila were growing up, but in a way they were still children despite all this. She smiled slightly, a mix of pride and pain, and said, "You're doing all right, Callan. I just wish everything wasn't so messy." I nodded. "Yeah, Mom. Yeah. Me too, Mom. Me too." Weeks blended into months, and I got into a routine which was both grueling and grounding. I learned to read people and their limits, to control my emotions rather than let them spill all over, and to speak up for kids when it seemed they deserved far better than they were getting. Dad's walls were slowly coming down, being more honest with me, more vulnerable, admitting when he had screwed up and sometimes asking for help in fixing strained relationships. Then, of course, there were angry moments when both of us ended up in a shouting match which left our household silent for hours, but these moments were balanced with moments of fun, sharing a meal, watching Eli's soccer matches and Lila's ballet performances. Eventually, I recognized that no matter how split a family might be, it was never impossible to connect with each other. But sometimes this took a lot of work and a series of very painful acceptances. One evening, I found myself in an empty kitchen absorbed in a picture of Dad and me when I was 8, both of us grinning inanely after a fishing expedition. Memories clicked in of a time when I trusted Dad completely, and took so much pride in our bond. Yet when I thought of this bond now, I wondered if these two things, the good and the bad, could coexist side by side in seamless amity. Could a part of me love and another part of me hate in tandem? Perhaps not yet, but over these days, I began to realize a glimmer of a light. As I went to bed, I knew that the most difficult part of this ordeal would come next, getting Mom through her emotions, being with Dad without agreeing with him, and figuring out a way to be with Eli and Lila without sacrificing myself in the process. It seemed overwhelming, but it also seemed important. Life had dumped us into this confusing, and sometimes maddening situation, and I decided to not let it get me down. I was going to put up with all of this, keep learning from it, shield those in our lives who can't shield themselves, and come face to face with all this darkness but not let it fill all our relationships. And in this, I found a glimmering hope in all this despair, a hope in all this hopelessness, a hope in this hope that perhaps somehow, someway, we can all coexist in this strange new reality and perhaps forgive where forgiveness is possible and move on in this twisted truth. The next day, I awoke with a sense of a newfound resolve I hadn't had since Dad had come clean with me. Tomorrow would bring all sorts of adventures and patience, and understanding, in all things I thought I had placed boundaries on. Mom wasn't quite right yet, her body failing her in ways I had yet to notice before, but this time because we were all ignoring a time constraint. Meanwhile, Dad sat in the living room with a piece of paper and a pen in front of him. He had begun writing an apology letter to Marissa and to Eli and Lila, apologizing in vain for all the things he had never been able to do, but in a last attempt to mend a rift formed years before over a small infraction in a secrecy which ensnared everything. I stood in the doorway, unsure if I ought to butt in on this morass of his own making. That afternoon, I again went to Marissa's with a small tin of freshly baked cookies for Eli and Lila. They greeted me at the front door with a grin, and in this small moment, I found solace in this strange life. I did my best to be honest with them, to respond to their questions in a way that neither idealized nor demonized their father. They seemed to understand, a resilience in them that allowed them to contain both love and frustration in equal measures. On the drive home, I thought again about forgiveness. No epiphany hit me, but rather a gradual dawning awareness of the possibility of multiple truths existing simultaneously in a single human heart. Dad had wronged them, yes, but he was a man capable of love, of change, of forgiveness. Mom had been wronged, yes, but she had lived, thrived, loved a family despite being dealt a hand so cruel and random. And I was somewhere in the middle, learning to function in this space without allowing it to overwhelm me. That night, we were in the living room, a quiet, still space with deepened shadows on the walls. Dad talked in a soft voice, reminiscing about moments from when I was a kid, moments I'd all but forgotten, and I listened with a combination of longing, pain, and tentative hope. Mom smiled, a small smile, her hands clasped in her lap, and in it, I saw her begin to find a way to heal, a way towards a strange kind of peace. Weeks passed in a heightened sense of emotional maneuvering. I strived to balance time with Mom, with Dad, with Eli and Lila. Times of friction remained, with arguments that left an aching silence in their wake for hours at a time, but interwoven were moments of joy, moments of victory, moments of a strange and quiet normalcy. I observed Dad with Eli and Lila, saw in them a sense of deep love in their eyes, a moment of attention-seeking listening, a sense of repair in all he did. I saw Marissa work her way through her emotions, a fierce loyalty side by side with a willingness to allow me into their lives for Eli and Lila's sake. But in all of this, I discovered that a family isn't measured by perfection or openness, not by a lack of pain in their prior moments, and a lack of admission of such pain. One evening, I sat alone on the porch, staring up at the stars, thinking of all that had occurred. The betrayal, the secrecy, the other family, all would be a part of our history, but did not have to represent all of it. Forgiveness, you see, wasn't an erasure of pain but an acceptance to move onward, to interact with each other in an honest way, with a desire for room to grow rather than to heal. Dad sat with me on this night, silently at first but finally sitting with me on those wooden steps. No talking occurred for a good long time, but instead observing of the dark night sky amidst the cricket's serenity, and gentle night air against our skin. In this silent moment, a subtle presence in me occurred, a quiet acceptance not of our future but of not being lost anymore despite our uncertain path before us. For months after this quiet moment on our porch, our family worked through this strange new reality. Mom's health waxed and waned, but her attitude remained good, a resilience in her face inspiring each and every day. Dad worked to regain our trust, small steps in this, talking honestly with all of us, for which he had repented, and becoming accountable not only with me but with my sister and children, all because of consequences he willingly faced because of a wrong in behavior. Eli and Lila were becoming more comfortable with me in their lives, phone calls more frequently, talking with me of school when they returned, asking me to come to their events, and in all of this, in a pure innocence, they were helping to mend some of these breaks in my own emotional realm. And in all of this, in a new way, I saw I wasn't missing all of life because of bad deeds and a struggle with secrets in a family but moments within this struggle of connection, happiness, and love. One evening, when I tucked a tired Lila into her bed, she whispered, "I'm glad you're here, Callan." And in this small way, in this small moment, I saw the pressure of 6 months of pain ease just a degree. Of course, it wasn't a resolution in and of itself, but it offered hope. The problem with our family, with our story, is not that it's complicated and tumultuous but rather that we can't see a way through it, a way for love and truth to coexist. As time passed in this year, I found moments of solace, not in letting go of our pain but in recognizing it and rather than moving through it blindly, engaging with it. I continued to work with Mom on her health issues, support Dad in mending relationships, and work to deepen a connection with Eli and Lila. As messy, complicated, and very painful it all was, it was very real. And in this reality, I began to grasp a truth. I think most people do not have a perfect family life, but those with a persistent commitment, with a willingness to face reality with courage, can foster an enduring bond despite all this. I did not have all the right answers, nor did I know what would come next in this life, but I did know this. In these acts of participation, of being present, despite all this imperfection, despite all this pain, all this complexity in our lives, perhaps, just perhaps, a way forward into a fragile but remaining connection might be forged. As I lay in my childhood bedroom room one quiet night, with nothing but this quiet hum of our heater in our otherwise silent household, I recognized in this moment forgiveness, understanding, and love can be our daily decisions, perhaps when our pain is a part of our past, perhaps when our truth remains a part of our reality. Looking back in this way, in this time, life had not returned to normal, not by any definition, but in this way, in this moment, among all this pain, this dysfunction, this hidden truth in our lives, a way had somehow been found to keep moving forward, together.